Hi there. In our devotion today, I want to take you to Paul's letter to Colossian Church, chapter 3. Here, Paul is listing different positions of people who have different responsibilities. Every position have a responsibility. And so Paul lists some of the position and their responsibility in this chapter. Let me read from verse 18 onwards. He's starting with wives. He says, "Wives, submit to your husbands as is fitting in the Lord." So that is the responsibility of a wife. Then when it comes to the husband, his responsibility, he says, "Husbands, love your wives and do not be harsh with them." See, that is the responsibility of a husband. And what about the position of a children? What is their responsibility? He says in verse 20, "Children, obey your parents in everything, for this pleases the Lord." When it comes to fathers, in verse 22, their responsibility is this. He says, "Fathers, do not embitter your children or they will become discouraged." So it is the responsibility of the father, make sure that your children are not discouraged. And then verse 22, he is listing another position, that is a slave, a worker. And what he says is an advice to the workers. He says, "Obey your earthly masters in everything and do it not only when their eyes is on you and to win their favor, but with sincerity of heart and reverence for the Lord. Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as working for the Lord, not for men, since you know that you will receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward. It is the Lord Christ you are serving. Anyone who does wrong will be repaid for his wrong, and there is no favoritism." So he is encouraging the workers, the slaves. At that time, in the time of Paul, there was slavery, and there were masters who needed people to work for them, and so they called it masters and slaves, and the slaves sometimes are being abused. And he says, Paul says to them as an encouraging word, when they are, whether they are watching you or not, do your best you can and be just. And whatever you do, you will be rewarded accordingly, because God is not a God who does favor to people. There is no favoritism with the Lord. And then in chapter 4, verse 1, Paul talks about the responsibility of masters. The people who are now, we call them bosses. Says, "Masters, provide your slaves with what is right and fair, because you know that you also have a master in heaven." So no one is free. Everyone is responsible for somebody. Now, right here, Paul says, just because you are a master, you cannot treat people bad. You have to be right and fair to the people who are working for you. And he says, because you know that you also have a master in heaven. In other words, Paul is saying that there is a God who is the master over everyone. He watches over everyone and he is going to reward accordingly. And so let us find out what is our responsibility. You may be a mother or a wife or a husband or a child or a father or a slave or a master. It doesn't matter. Every position have a responsibility. And we have to be right in the sight of the Lord. And when we do the best we can, according to what God desires us to do, and we will receive a reward accordingly. And then he encourages everyone. In verse 2, he says, "Devote yourselves in prayer, being watchful and thankful." He is encouraging them. It doesn't matter what position you are in and what kind of responsibility you have in, but all of us have to spend time in prayer. Devote yourselves to prayer and being watchful and thankful. We have to watch what's going on in the world. At the same time, cry out to the Lord for his mercy and grace every day of our life, and be thankful for all the great things that God has done for us. Sometimes when we are not grateful, we will not thank the Lord. You know, when we have the attitude, it is because we don't have gratitude. So let us have the gratitude in our heart and give thanks to the Lord and reach out to Him and pray. Devote yourselves in prayer and take your responsibility and do things accordingly, because there's going to be a reward from the Lord. God bless you today as you continue to serve the Lord. Whatever responsibility you have, do the best you can, and God will bless you. God bless you today.